Good morning, social media friends, and other friends that aren't just through social media. Maybe your friends of friends who have been made aware of today's episode of Real Living in Chicago. Let me bring up that banner so I remind myself where I am at as well. So welcome to all of you who are either watching today's episode of Real Living in Chicagoland as a live stream, or if you may be getting this, watching this, listening to this as an on-demand recording. Before I continue, I was alerted this morning that there may be some technical problems, technical difficulties for this live stream to be consumed on my Facebook feed. So if you are kind of scratching your head like, Bill, where are you? I don't see your live stream. No worries. We'll get you over that hump. I'll probably have to drop in a link to this recording after the fact. But that said, if you happen to be able to bounce over to LinkedIn, then that's the easiest way for you to consume this, watch this, listen to this, and participate along the way. My co-host today, Stewart Ramirez, is enjoying himself. He's getting some R&R, rest and relaxation, as he should. He's been working really hard, helping a lot of his clients, move, deal with what I call at least probably 3 of the 5 Ds of life events. By the way, the 5 Ds are diamonds, diapers, divorce, what's another one? Downsizing. There you go. And then, unfortunately, the last one, I'll let you kind of assume what that is. So Stewart, like I said, he's enjoying himself in a sunny part of the world. So let me bring up, his presence, at least digitally. For those of you who don't know Stewart, here is his information. And as you can see, he helps a lot of his clients transition through life events from whether it be buying their first home because they're just getting married, buying their next home, a bigger home because of more diapers. And then, of course, sometimes the home has to be dealt with because of a separation or divorce. And for those of you who are wondering, like, well, hey, I'm more interested in a brand new home. I want and I love the new paint smell. He can actually help you do that as well. Here's a perfect example. It's a brand new construction home, never lived in, brand spanking new paint smell, ready for you in the west suburb of Downers Grove. So with all of that said, I wanted to kind of do my part, given Stewart's at least online presence, digital presence with me today. Let's now talk about those 5 Ds, right? Right now in the business of real estate, who are doing things, who's making the moves? Usually right now, because of how lopsided the market is, it's the households who are, facing those at least 3 life events. They're getting married. They just dropped some bucks on a nice diamond. They're getting married. They want to create their next new home together. The next one is diapers. Maybe the first set, the second set, right? First kid, second kid. That usually right now is what's driving the movement of households from one location to another. The third, of course, is divorce. The need to separate, the need to move to the next chapter. And for that reason today, I've asked one of my relationships, Colleen, to join me in today's live stream conversation. Why? Because she's an expert at how to help families, households navigate through this sometimes tough event. So let's welcome Colleen into the room and let's engage her in an interesting conversation. Hello, Colleen.
Hi, Bill. How are you?
I'm doing well. You're looking wonderful.
You as well. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
And I know you recently made a move with your business to a law firm called Bierman, which is, highly recognized here in not just Chicago, but I think like throughout the U.S. Am I correct?
You're correct about that. We're
Yeah.
actually the biggest family law firm in Illinois, and depending on who you talk with in the nation.
Yeah. So let me bring up your digital presence for the people who may not know you, which I find hard to believe. They probably know you through what I call the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. So here we go. For those of you who may not know Colleen, as part of your benefiting from the conversation Colleen and I will have together, here's a simple, quick way for you to find her. Her name, as you can see, is quite unique. You can Google search. It'll probably get you here to this landing page that I'm sharing with you. So, Colleen, you heard me describe before I brought you into the studio, the 5 Ds, right, of life events: diamonds, diapers. Maybe it's multiple sets at the same time, right? The twins, the triplets. I've heard those stories. Okay. And the third life event, which I know is really the core of your business, family law. How to help two parties separate, move on to their separate next chapters. So with that as a nice backdrop, so audience members get a sense of like, oh, she's one of those attorneys from that famous law show, TV series, LA Law. And I'm like, well, yeah, kind of, just use that persona. Let me ask the first question to get you warmed up in today's conversation. What are the most common questions, Colleen, you get in that first initial consultation?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I find myself doing a lot of consultations right now. Really, I'm doing them frequently, but especially after the holidays and going into tax season, that's a big time for people to start engaging family law attorneys and get some questions answered that maybe they've been holding off on for a bit of time. The first question I get is, what do you think of my case? So when I do a consult with an individual, I let them know that I want to first get to know them, get a sense of who they are, get a sense of what brings them into court or what brings them to call an attorney. And then I allow them to ask some questions. From there, once I have all of their questions answered, I can give a bit of advice about the process that they're going through and the next steps that I would foresee in their case.
Okay.
And really how that works depends on when people come to me. Sometimes people come to me at the outset of a case before anything is filed, and sometimes in the middle or even at the ends when we're ramping up for trial. So depending on where we are in the case and depending on this family's particular circumstances, I can give an assessment about the case and potential outcomes and how I can come in to help.
Is it easier for the client to have that conversation, to engage you in the consultation as early as possible, as opposed to in the middle or just about when things have to get finalized? I'm curious to get your feedback to that question.
Yeah, I would say the earlier the better.
Right.
Sometimes I see clients who have been representing themselves or working with a different attorney and they want to make the change and hire me. And I can certainly help those individuals, but lots of times there's a little bit of cleanup and damage control that needs to be done based on what happened in the case before I stepped in.
Yeah, I know the feeling. Sometimes with my business as well, we are initially engaged as what I call Plan B. We're the bridesmaid waiting in the wing. We're not the chosen bride to really participate and move forward yet. But then something happens where they tap on our door and say, no, you're no longer Plan B, Bill. We need you to be Plan A. And it sounds like you face the same process and flow.
Yes, it can happen. It's less common for that to happen than for people to hire me at the outset, but it does happen, and I'm always willing to help where I can.
Is it easier, or let me rephrase my question. is it any easier for you to do what you do well, very well, day in, day out, with a certain demographics of clients? Like if they are younger versus older, they've been married for some time. Can you shed some light on that for our audience members?
Sure. So I represent the full spectrum of clients, and I really say it's anyone who's going through a family transition. So that
Okay.
could be at the outset of a relationship with a prenup, in the middle of a relationship with an adoption or a postnuptial agreement, and then on the divorce stage of your 4Ds, a divorce, custody, orders of protection, disputes. Um, I can help really anyone that's living in Illinois because that's where I'm licensed and that's where my firm practices.
Okay.
But really, my bread and butter are folks who are living in Cook County because that's where I tend to represent the most. In terms of other demographics, really my clients are across the board. Younger marriages as opposed to older marriages, kids, no kids, all of that.
All of that. Life happens, right? There's that cliche, not to mention there's probably enough movies that use that caption. Life happens. It doesn't matter, right?
Absolutely.
You'll see enough of that. Let's now move the conversation to, I think, one thing that usually can be a hot topic, a challenging topic, which is for clients going through the family law event. What are some myths versus realities as it relates to maintenance income for one spouse versus the other?
Absolutely. So that I would say the first one is that maintenance and alimony are not the same thing, and that's just not true. Maintenance, as you hear it today, is actually the term we now use here in Illinois when we're talking about alimony, which essentially only means spousal support.
Okay.
Another myth we hear is that maintenance is always paid by husband to wife, and that's just not true at all. What maintenance is meant to be is a support payment payable by a significantly higher earning spouse to the lower earning spouse, period. Gender is not a determining factor there.
Okay.
Another myth is my ex was a bad actor, so I don't need to pay him or her. And that's not true. Here in Illinois, we have a no-fault state, which means that the only grounds for divorce that folks file for divorce under is irreconcilable differences. You don't need to make a showing of who caused a breakdown in the marriage, for example. So because of that, an award of statutory guideline maintenance is purely a math calculation. It doesn't look to bad actions or gender. It really looks to the length of the marriage and the respective incomes between the parties to help the lower earning spouse enjoy a similar lifestyle to the one he or she enjoyed during the marriage for generally a temporary period of time until he or she is able to become more self-supporting.
Gotcha. And I picked up on that last bit that you shared, which is a finite period of time, meaning maintenance income doesn't last forever.
Right. And that's actually another myth that I hear, which is I'll need to pay maintenance forever. And it's not forever. It's a calculation based on the length of the marriage. And it's important to know that there are also statutory termination events for any maintenance calculation. And I would say the most important one to be mindful of is if and when the receiver of maintenance begin living with another partner on a conjugal basis or remarries, that can terminate maintenance right then and there.
Okay, that makes sense because because that clearly is their next life event change that should kind of spell out to the fact that, well, no longer do you really require maintenance income that was agreed upon from our dissolution of marriage and family and so forth.
Right. That's someone going right back to the diamond stage of the 40s.
Yes, you're right. You're right. Yeah. You know, the 5Ds, they can repeat themselves. It's never just going in one direction and that's it.
Absolutely. You're right about that.
Do you find in the world that we live in right now, Colleen, do you find that more people, more spouses coming together are more keen to like postnups as opposed to prenups? I'm curious to get your input to that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Lots of times I'm surprised to hear that people don't know what postnuptial agreements are. So, for your audience, when we're talking about a postnuptial agreement, really what it is it operates like a prenuptial agreement. A
Okay.
prenuptial agreement is a contract entered into by two people who are contemplating marriage. And really, what it is to detail how they want to handle their property, incomes, assets, and debts during the marriage, and God forbid, if the marriage terminates. A postnuptial agreement operates in much the same way, except the difference is it's something that's arrived at during the marriage as opposed to before. But just like a prenup, it goes into effect if the marriage terminates, and hopefully provides some predictability for how that case should play out to avoid protracted divorce litigation. I'm finding that prenuptial agreements are more commonly known about in the wider public, and therefore I think tend to be more popular than postnuptial agreements.
Okay.
And I do find that that's a better time to come into one, if at all possible, because you're contemplating marriage. If the negotiations go sideways, you don't need to go through with the marriage. And it also provides a good deal of financial intimacy at the outset of a relationship, because you're having these big conversations as you're preparing for a life together.
Sure, sure. You're setting up expectations up front. You're clearly drawing some lines in the sand as to how both sides benefit up front. So that makes more sense. Perfect, perfect. So as we wrap up today's episode of Real Living in Chicagoland, once again, for those of you who need to start a conversation, that's where it must always begin with Colleen, because you have a family law matter that requires her expertise. Like I said, real easy to find her. Her name is so unique, and just do a rewind of this recording, you can get to her landing page. As we wrap up today's episode of Real Living in Chicagoland, for those of you who may be going through a few of the 5 Ds of life events, diamonds, diapers, perhaps divorce, and you need to start a conversation with either Stewart and or myself, all you need to do is simply scan the QR code. We will gladly engage you in a conversation. For today, Colleen, thank you for sharing your time with me and our audience together. It's been great seeing you, and some of the information that you shared with all of us has been truly enlightening.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Bill. I invite all of your audience to reach out if there are any questions, and thank you again for your time here. It's been great to catch up with you.
Yeah, likewise. So everyone, until we see each other in the next episode of Real Living in Chicagoland. Adios.